So it's scrolling. I don't know if I'm live yet. It looks like I'm about to be live. It looks like I'm live. All right. Let's see what happens. Hello, everybody. We're going to give it a few minutes as I know people are going to be jumping in after the start of the hour. Oh, hello, Susan. Oh, it's Allison. Hello, friend. It's so much fun to be able to see everybody. We're going to start out really slowly and let people join in on the live. Hello, hello. Oh, this is so fun. I'm so glad that you can see and hear me. I am live. I'm alive. This is so much fun, guys. I'm really happy to see all of you here. Hello, Jenny Murphy, my lovely CSAT. Good to see you here. Say hello if you've jumped in the room. Maybe mention where you are in the world because I know we have people, gosh, all over the place. I think we have a pretty darn big contingent of folks that are in the US, but I know, hello, Tracy. I know that there's a whole lot of people in the UK. Hi, Ken. Oh, lovely to see you here. Oh, there we go. Some England, some Connecticut, some Maine. Surrey, wonderful. Oh, it's going fast and furious. I just love it. I love seeing all of you here. So, what we're going to do today, first of all, let me thank Ruby and everybody that was involved in putting on this virtual conference. Super fun. Oh, Italy, woohoo! Canada, wonderful. But I just really want to thank everybody. What an exciting, wonderful way to bring all sorts of people together. And I'm really happy to be here. Now, one of the things that I was instructed was to let this be, hello, Patio Farrell, to let this be pretty organic insofar as mostly question and answer type situation here. And I'm going to do my very best to keep up with the chat box. It's interesting. It's got a funny streaming thing where I have to keep like scrolling down, and that's probably user error, I'm sure. But I will figure it out. Oh, Wendy's here, my home girl, right around the corner. How fun. Hi. So, I wanted to start out with it of, here's what we're gonna talk about today. But I am very, very ready to just make this a casual conversation amongst all of us and have, time to discuss the questions that you have specific to separation anxiety. And that's separation anxiety in dogs. Unfortunately, I am not particularly skilled with the other species that sometimes can be afflicted by this issue. I want to start out by saying a couple of things because I feel like just anything that people could take away from today. There are several sort of myths and several thoughts that are out there about separation related problems. And I want to make sure that we can bust a couple of those myths today and then just talk away about all of your questions or concerns. Um, so, the first thing I want to just remind everybody separation anxiety is considerably prevalent, okay? Depending on which research that you look at, we're looking at the range of 20-ish percent all the way up to about 55% of the pet dog population that suffers from separation anxiety. If I were to take, let's just say 50%, the equivalent of 50% of the dogs in the US, pet dogs in the US, that are suffering with separation related issues would be about 38 million dogs. It's a lot of dogs that need help. So I'm so glad there are so many professionals here and we can dive right in and see how many of you will be able to support these dogs and the people that love them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that it's not just a prevalence of the number of dogs that are afflicted with this issue, but it's also the most researched behavior um, disorder in published studies. And when I talk about those published studies, I'm talking about those that are in experimental research and retrospective research in the fields of applied animal behavior and veterinary behavior. We have a lot of great. Oh, look who's here, Kimberly. You're such a superstar. So we have a lot of powerful information and research available to us about what is going on with these dogs and how to hopefully help them in the best way possible. Stephanie, why, thank you. I love those paintings too. I figured as a dog professional, I needed some dog art in my room. Thanks for the comment. Um, I just wanted to remind everybody of the prevalence of this issue, not only the number of dogs that are suffering, but also the research that we have. And let's just talk a little bit about some of the things that the research indicates for us. You know, it is so common. We get contacted by a lot of people all over the world whose dogs are suffering with separation related issues. And one of the most common occurrences in our phone or Zoom calls when we talk to all these different dog guardians all over is that people are feeling sad, they're feeling guilty, they're feeling overwhelmed with the concern for their dog, and understandably so. But there was one thing that I said in there that I want to make sure we can hopefully absolve people of. The guilt that consumes so many dog guardians that have this assumption or have been told by like-minded people um, that they're spoiling their dog and therefore that's why their dog is having these problems with home alone time distress. That guilt is overwhelming for people. And I wanted to start out today by reminding people that there's a lot of research on separation anxiety, and much of the research has been done to explain what does not correlate or cause separation anxiety, and particularly not correlational. We are a little obscure on causation, and we can talk about that today too. But all the way back in 1991, when the research started getting going, you know, sort of bananas regarding separation anxiety, there was a wonderful study done by McCrave and some colleagues that looked at whether spoiling activities such as sleeping in the bed, feeding the dog from the table, taking the dog on errands and trips, allowing the dog on furniture, all of those sorts of considered spoiling activities um, do not correlate with separation anxiety. And that was back in 1991, and that research has been replicated time and time again. The reasons I bring that up is I find it really important for us to be able to stop owner blaming when it comes to separation anxiety. You know, if we can absolve that guilt that people are feeling, I think that is so very important. Allison says, almost all my clients are so relieved when I tell them it isn't their fault and I give them permission, love that word, to spoil their dogs. Love that, Allison. And I feel the same way with everybody that I speak to. They're like, well, of course, if I didn't do this or if I did do that, I'm sure my dog would not have this issue. And we not only have seen it in the dogs, the many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands of dogs that we have worked with as certified separation anxiety trainers over the last 20 years. But we've got the research to show us that there is no correlation between things like sleeping on the bed and other so-called spoiling activity and separation anxiety. Um, so I feel like that's an important, whether we call that a myth that spoiling causes separation anxiety. I want to bust that one so that we no longer feel that need to jump into that sort of owner blaming realm. Oh, Ruby is here. Ruby, I gave you a shout out in the very beginning, thanking you for inviting me. And I'm so glad that you're able to be here. Thank you, thank you. And thank you to all of you that have contributed to setting this virtual conference up. I think it's been tremendous seeing so many people with such amazing expertise be able to jump in and talk about various topics that are so important to all of us. So I'm going to keep sort of chatting away, but I'm ready to um, take questions and comments, but I'll just keep going along with some information that I think is really important and useful. Oh, Robin, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. Robin says, I find that spoiling, quote unquote, actually makes for a better relationship and hence helps create the secure attachment, and that helps with solving the separation anxiety. One of the things that's interesting about attachment, if you will, and the jury is a bit out on attachment stuff. Go down that rabbit hole too much. But one of the things that I want to mention about that is, we have a lot of research more so about children, but gaining even more about dogs that is able to define what makes for secure attachments, and I'm using air quotes because there's controversy around attachment, and how the whether that's the proper word to use or not. But I want everyone to know that what we're finding, particularly in the research with children, is that those spoiling, loving, etc., attention with children does lead to a more balanced and stable human being as the children grow older, and that the attachment style, again, air quotes there because it's different terminology for every field, is actually beneficial to helping individuals in many species with anxiety. So, I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to anxiety in children, but what we do know about separation anxiety dogs is we see that um, hyper attachment of dogs to the owner, let's call it, is not necessarily an indicator that's the reason behind separation anxiety. Really interesting stuff. There's a great research article that was done in 2006 by I'm going to say it wrong, Parsarathi, 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 Parth. Seraphy. Anyway, if someone knows how to say it or spell it, please throw it in the text. And so if anybody's interested in attachment styles and things like that and hyper attachment, that's a great research paper to look into. All right, let me see what I've missed. I'm like watching and I have to scroll in order to find things. Oh, Susan, volunteer at a senior sanctuary, lots of separation anxiety from old dogs being given up. Oh, thank you for that comment, Stephanie, about helping them feel more confident. Robbie, my coonhound mix doesn't like when we leave. We don't use a crate for a few different reasons, but when we leave, he barks and intensely scratches the front door and floor to the point of needing to cover the area with plexiglass to reduce access. It takes him 15 to 45 minutes to calm down. We track him on a baby cam. He's not interested in any food when we go and saves it until we come home. Yeah, unfortunately, food, and let me make a sort of disclaimer here. I am the biggest advocate for the use of food in most training, particularly for operant training. It can be one of, if not the most efficient and effective means of achieving operant behaviors for many, many dogs. Having said that, in separation anxiety work is not a fix all, a cure all, and quite frankly, particularly the way that it is most commonly used, the order of events is creating a situation that is actually not ideal for working with separation anxiety dogs. So let me pause there and just remind you, if you are going to leave a, let's say, a food stuffed toy, give that, if you give that to your dog and then exit for a duration that causes them distress, the order of events there is backwards. We're saying, here's something yummy, and that predicts something scary and something awful. So yummy predicts yucky. Ooh, that's backwards. Careful about that. And so for many separation anxiety, Robbie's coonhound here touch the food anyway, so it's a bit superfluous to even incorporate it. Um, it can have some, unfortunate effects of having them be afraid, if you will, of engaging in a food toy and starting to show signs of distress when the food toy is introduced. So there are insofar as tips, Robbie, we'll be talking about a variety of different aspects of separation anxiety today, but feel free to go and use and research all of our free blogs on our website. There are so many certified separation anxiety trainers out there and work with you, because it is a very fixable problem, but it is only resolved with time and very careful, incremental, and gradual training. So, Karen, you have such a really good point. I hope I'm keeping up with all this. I keep having to scroll. What happens when you go back to work because you've been home 24/7 in the pandemic? Um, And so I love that you're talking about lessening the shock of you going back to work. And right now, for anybody and everybody listening, whether you're live, whether you see this a little later, we are in pretty unprecedented times, as we all have seen and felt and experienced or so, because of this pandemic. And as Karen mentioned, many of us have been home virtually 24/7 with our dogs. And it's going to be a tremendous contrast when we return to work and other life activities in post pandemic times. And so now, like literally today, I would like to inspire all of you to start to work on preparing your dog for alone time. And that should and can start in the midst of increments to determine whether there is some distress about being left alone. We've got, whether it's weeks or months or maybe more before we return to work, like Karen will be returning to work in June. We can start to use very small increments of alone time to help our dogs be prepared for when we return to being gone for longer durations of time. I think dogs and kids' ability are more cognitively similar than what we may think. You're just a dog trainer, Ruby. Oh, Ruby is not just a dog trainer. Thank you for putting to Kona's Touch. Thank you for putting the name there. I'm still going to say it wrong. So Eliza, or I think it's probably Eliza, right above you in the chat box is the of that paper. Um, we know that suspending absences is necessary for the resolution of separation anxiety. What are some creative ways you've seen for managing absences? Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring this up, Allison. Um, it is paramount, and there's so much research about this, that in order to achieve optimal progress during a separation anxiety protocol, the dog needs to only be subjected to separations that he or she can successfully tolerate. And for some dogs, that 10 seconds. For others, it may be 10 minutes. And that is all dependent on watching your dog when left alone and assessing the duration with which it takes for he or she to start to show some level of worry, panic, discomfort, etc. And so, in order for us to proceed in a positive way, in order to arrive at resolution of separation anxiety, we need to manage the dog in such a way that the dog is not left alone for longer than he or she can handle. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be you personally, you, the pet parent. But it does mean that the dog has to be in an environment where he or she is not entirely alone to experience that distress. And before I go on to finish in Allison's question about what are some creative solutions, I want people to really understand something. Oftentimes people will say, "Oh my gosh, that's an impossible thing to ask." That we don't leave our dogs alone for longer than they can handle during the training process. But I want everyone to hear this. We track a lot of data as certified separation anxiety trainers, and some of the data that we track with all of our prospective clients is whether or not they are willing to suspend absences, or whether they already have been doing it for a while, or whether they're saying, "Yeah, I can do it. I just need to learn how." And so this last year, we tracked 2,398 prospective clients. 50% of those clients were already suspending absences or said, "Yeah, I'm happy to start like this very second." An additional 35% said, "I'm happy to do so. I just need some creative options." So that's 85% of a fairly good data pool, right? 2,398 prospective separation anxiety clients. 85% of them said that they would be willing to not leave their dog alone during the protocol. And I'm sorry, Sherry, she doesn't have access to this live, but I'm pretty sure that it's recorded, and she can always reach out if she needs help. So let's some creative ways for managing absences. I mean, first, let's talk about the typical ways, right? Neighbors that can watch the dog for a little while. Maybe the neighbor has a dog that is a nice friend of your own dog, and they can play together while you have to go run errands and things like that. Family, friends, neighbors, all within that category, right? And don't be surprised if it takes a bit of a village. You know, on Thursdays, when you always have that one class that you go to, you can have, Sally up the street watch your dog. But on Mondays, when you a different event, it may need to be your friend's cousin's neighbor, Sam, who is not currently um, very busy and is happy to come over and watch your dog, right? So it may take more than just one individual solution. And I want people to remember that we are really only limited by our creativity, and people are so willing to help, particularly with your cute dog that has those gorgeous eyes and adorable little nose licks. And so creating some sort of informational, whether it's a flyer, whether it's a post on Facebook, obviously all these things have to be vetted when someone is going to help you. But getting as creative as possible and reaching out to as many individuals as possible to help you is really crucial. And then I'll tell you one last, although I've got a lot of things coming up here, so I'll just remind all of you that reaching out in creative ways, whether that's via social media, whether that's looking at your local church bulletin, whether that's finding a retirement community that would be interested in having some of the folks there watch your dog, whether that's posting something at the local college, university, to tell people free Wi-Fi at my house if you come hang out with my dog, all those sorts of things. All right, Agnes mentions she's fostering a dog at the that had separation anxiety at the previous owner. Not left him alone in 4 months. Do I think he would benefit from being trained to be able to stay alone at home? This is a good question. So there are pros to working with a dog that is in foster care. But interestingly enough, the pros are not as profound as we may think. Here's what we have to remember. Generalize well in most situations, right? And so if Agnes were to start working with the foster dog and gradually, very systematically and incrementally building up some duration that that dog could be left alone, that does not necessarily mean that when that dog goes to his or her forever home, his home, that he will be able to tolerate that same duration that was trained in the current environment. Now, here's the biggest pro of working on separation anxiety while in foster care, though. Let's say you work with him for the next few weeks or months or whatever it is, and you're like, yep, he did great, he's able to be left alone for a couple of hours, whatever you work up to, whether it's a 15-minute absence or a 2-hour absence, it doesn't really matter. But what that does is gives you and the adopter information about the fact that yes, indeed, you know that with appropriate training, this dog can continue to progress even in his new environment. And you should be able to see that same type of improvement and progress in the new environment. But it doesn't mean that that dog will be able to stay alone for that particular duration when they are in their new environment. Um, Okay. So many clients can't arrange for company for their dogs. cannot afford to pay someone. Yeah, so there's a lot of creative solutions that are either low cost or no cost. And I think we need to remind our clients and inspire them to realize that this is not an option per se if they want to help their dog resolve this problem. Um, every time that they leave the dog alone for longer to handle, the problem will at best continue at the same level, but quite typically there is a considerable exacerbation of the problem. So it's very, very important. Uh, Okay, is there a way to diagnose an 11-week-old puppy with SA? First of all, just note to that comment, Sherry. I'm not a vet. I cannot diagnose a condition, or in this case, a syndrome. But I will tell you that separation anxiety or separation related behaviors are actually um, evolutionarily appropriate behaviors for puppies. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that we say, well, he's a puppy, we'll just let him cry it out in his crate and he'll figure it out. I think it's our job, I think it's our responsibility as dog guardians to give our puppies and adult dogs a metaphorical soft place to land, right? We don't have to let them cry it out. We don't have to put them through continued stress in order for them to quote, get over it. So I'm glad for this question. Um, and and indeed, you're mentioning you're going to bring your iPad so that she can watch it live. Using technology, and boy, is the technology so much easier in this day and age. My goodness, here I am on live on this Facebook platform, and I am absolutely technologically defunct as a human being. So if I can do this, really anybody can. But we've got everything from using online platforms like Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and things like that to watch our dogs. And there's also very inexpensive standalone cameras that can be purchased to live if that's preferred. Thought on getting an adopter on board with an SA dog. Great question, Brianna. Um, And one of the things, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, Brianna, we are really working hard, although, boy, our time is quite limited, but we're working hard on trying to create a best practices guide for shelters and rescues um, that have separation anxiety dogs in their care. Because I think that the rehoming process needs to be pretty specific. Not only the process of finding the adopter, but also counseling the adopter. And I think that it is an important responsibility that shelters and rescues carry about being rather transparent about the fact that the dog will not be ready to be left alone, shortly after adoption. So counseling the client about that. And one thing, and boy, this is a topic we could talk about all day, and I'll make sure I'm catching up with the text box. But one thing I want people to remember, separation anxiety dogs are so incredible. They're incredible little beings because that what they want to do is hang out with you, right? And so once we resolve the separation anxiety, they tend to be some of the most wonderfully perfect dogs. Now, of course, there are exceptions. So, and I understand that we've got some separation anxiety dogs that do indeed have reactivity and other issues. But the reason I mention that um, with regard to Brianna's question is it is really typical in a shelter and rescue environment at the three-legged, one-eyed dog that has that is Cushing's positive, has Cushing's, and is scruffy and has a little alopecia around his, hind end. There are people lining up to have those dogs in their lives. Um, there are people that just want to be that caretaker. And I really, truly feel, at least personally, my bias is that we need to uh, market, for lack of better words, these dogs um, as no different than a dog that has a medical emergency, right? This is a behavioral emergency, and they're going to need special care and special training in order to help them. And I feel strongly that shelters and rescues should raise the right amount of funding, or should at least be able to provide the right amount of information in order to set these dogs on the right path, just medical problems. Okay, I'm not sure if pet owners know that there are now help for right pet insurance in many places, particularly there in the UK. Insurance will cover the cost of some of the training and certainly the veterinary care. I have a new client with two dogs. Younger one has some distress. Okay, this is about a multi-dog household. Where we start working on the gradual absences by starting to move the other dog. So I would actually need some more information about that case in particular. But let me say that one thing that's important is the separation anxiety protocols that need to be implemented with a single dog are really not at all different when there's a multi-dog household. Whoever is the afflicted dog, in other words, the dog that is suffering with some alone time distress, is the one which sets the pace of the protocol. And so, in most cases, the second doesn't have to be removed from the environment, but they also aren't going to help the situation. Getting a second dog, interestingly enough, so many people recommend that, with good intention. Um, but there's been many, many studies. The one that comes to mind that was done in, I think it was 1999 by Lund and Jorgensen, um, talked about that they really found no significant effect of the presence of other dogs in the home on separation anxiety afflicted dogs. Um, I like to compare it to how we would not require a dog who is afraid of unfamiliar people to be around unfamiliar people until they are ready for it. It is sometimes a little easier to prevent dogs from interacting with unfamiliar people, so it's not as overwhelming of a requirement. Very well stated. Thank you for saying that, Allison. Claire, any advice for dog whining in the middle of the night? Woo, dog whining in the middle of the night could be of a whole lot of different things that may not be separation related. And so that's one that I would talk to with a private behaviorist or trainer, and or ask your vet about it. If you haven't seen your vet in a handful of months, then it's imperative that you talk to your vet about whether there's any medical indicators that could be associated with what's happening. Um, your dogs are boring when left alone. That's so cute. Oh, Ingrid, you are so sweet. Thank you for your kind comments. Uh, what are your thoughts, Stephanie? What are your thoughts on speaking to a dog with separation anxiety over a camera? So I have a personal bias about this, probably only because in my experience, I mean, I've seen now that everybody and anybody just can, buy a camera online. Um, what we typically see is that one of two things. Either speaking over the camera causes additional stress, concern, anxiety for some of these separation anxiety dogs, or it does absolutely nothing. And I could go on about this forever insofar as why the camera speaker is very different voice and all of these sorts of things. But I recommend that for those of you that don't already follow Eileen Anderson's blog, check out a lot of her information about this. And I mean, about sound and how it influences and all of that. I think it's so important. But one of the other reasons why I don't really suggest that people speak over the camera, even if it makes them feel a little better, is that it puts us in a particular situation of feeling the need to talk to our dog during absences and have them be dependent on it. And if we use a systematic protocol to help them be left alone successfully, they shouldn't be needing to be reliant on a voice to keep them company, if you will. Ingrid, I just learned that DS actually works better than CC for separation anxiety, which is so interesting. Do you have a link to anything which addresses that? Oh my gosh, there's so many links. One thing that I'll read you a quote. I'm going to pull it up here because I think it's so powerful. Um, and I'm trying to find it on my desktop, which is, kind of a crazy thought. I have so many windows open. Um, I'm going to say her name wrong. And I've tried to learn it a million times, and for some reason, I don't get it right. I wish someone on here could correct me, but please type it in for anybody that knows it. It's Furerbacher, Erica. Such a powerful research study that was produced last year in 2020. And the quote that I love in her study says, the dog that had the highest percentage of successful trials also had the owner who increased the departure duration the slowest and had the greatest number of short departures. So here's the kicker. The authors concluded that systematic desensitization was the critical component for successful treatment, and that counterconditioning and other behavioral advice did not influence the behavioral outcome. Wow, important stuff. And we've been using desensitization exclusively for our separation anxiety clients for a long time. Um, Maybe a good resource, Ingrid, is if you go to my website, there's a blog called Comfort Food. And that might shed a little light on it too, because this is a topic we could talk, we could go through all day long. Um, I'm Janet or Jeanette. Sorry if I said it wrong. Um, so many protocols suggest taking separation anxiety dogs to daycare. If a dog is comfortable just being in the presence of any human, daycare is a great option during training. Uh, right. However, if dogs are triggered only when separated from a particular individual's, daycare is not an option. Those dogs are extremely stressed, and that stress is conveyed to all the other dogs in the daycare environment. Yeah, I mean, daycare is appropriate for some dogs, but not all, and goes the other way too. Some dogs are appropriate for, I mean, some daycares are appropriate for certain dogs, but they are not appropriate for all dogs. And many dogs would find daycare to be overwhelming, and they may be distressed in that environment, which is not appropriate for them, and it's not good for the daycare environment, etc. Uh, Allison, speaking of medical concerns, I have a client who had a recent regression after hitting 4 hours of comfortable alone time. I know regressions are normal, but he went all the way down to only a few minutes. We have built back up, but he's not as consistent as he used to be. It turns out his first round of heartworm treatment wasn't successful, and he has to go through another round. Medical conditions are indeed so impactful. There is a lot of great research and more coming forward about the about how pain in particular, but pain and other medical indicators can truly impact home alone behaviors. And so that's so important. And I hope we see more and more um, information about that. Um, coming forth. We have a really interesting case from several years ago where a dog um, had just really had a difficult time with her anal glands, and her anal glands had to be expressed fairly regularly. And we would notice that when the anal glands had not been expressed for a little longer, the dog did rather poorly with her absences. So it was sort of like, she would get her anal glands expressed. She would do great for days or weeks. But as it got closer and closer to her needing to have her anal glands expressed again, she would start to deteriorate a little bit with her protocol. And I think it was and we track all this data very, very carefully for each and every one of our clients. We do graphs and charts, and we dive deep into the data that we are able to collect. And so it was very impactful on the protocol, and it gave us a great indicator as to how often she needed that medical attention with her anal glands. How do you work on desensitization with it? And thank you to those that put the link to Erica's study. It's really a powerful study. Um, okay, how do you work on desensitization with a dog that immediately starts showing signs of distress simply by being separated from her owner by an X-pen, but the owner are still there right on the other side of the X-pen? Hard to know how to start desensitizing and getting some duration when the signs of distress are so immediate. Um, we have to always remember to work with the dog in front of us. And there's sort of an it depends to your answer, and because we would want a little more information. Some dogs, and quite a lot of separation anxiety dogs, experience tremendous difficulty with confinement. And that confinement anxiety can be quite prevalent uh, in um, in dogs that have separation anxiety concerns. Um, and so the first thing I would do with a dog when someone was literally just standing right on the other side of the next pan is determining whether not having a barrier of sorts would allow for less distress. And from there, they could start to work on the beginnings of any separation anxiety protocol. Go to the door, jiggle the doorknob, and those sorts of things, but only which the dog can handle. And Kristen, I will tell you that is a big chunk of our caseload. Dogs that are really distressed immediately upon separation, we'll call it. And separation can sometimes mean a barrier and can sometimes mean an actual exit from the home, right? And so we have to figure out what environment is best for that particular animal, for that particular dog. so that we can set them up for success. But if we have to start in the smallest of increments by literally just walking a couple of feet away and returning in a gradual and very systematic fashion, that's the place we have to begin. And the dog is the one that lets us know. I always talk about, the dog tells us what they need and want. And obviously, I don't mean that by the dog speaking to us, but rather that the dog's body language will indicate if we're going too fast, if we're moving at an appropriate level, if we need to do smaller increments, and if we need to start with a less challenging criteria. All right. So feel free, we still have about 10 minutes. Feel free to pop anything additional into the chat box. One of the things that I want to make sure I talk about before, we end up wrapping up for the day, um, is, to this day, although it's getting tremendously better, there are a lot of people, both non-dog professional and dog professional, that feel that separation anxiety is just like not something that's fixable. And I not only do I want to tell people that I vehemently disagree with that, because we see so much progress with these animals when we work with them systematically. But that's not just my opinion. I mean, there have been so many research studies out. The one that comes to mind is the one that was done in 2008 by Daniel Mills and Sherman. Um, I mean, they talk about the fact that dog owners really need to be encouraged that not only is it never too late, nor is a case ever too bad to contemplate treatment, because those factors don't actually seem to affect the prognosis. And the treatment is relatively straightforward for most dog guardians. Now, when I say straightforward, it's one of those things where I, hearken Bob Bailey, because it's simple but not easy, right? Yes, there are a lot of environmental factors and mitigating components to making sure that a separation anxiety dog has the exact right protocol for that individual. But we see tremendous success with these dogs when we work with them so systematically. So far, Dad's been able to go up to 30 minutes. Ah, Yahoo! I want to know how our impending week-long vacation will impact our training. Thank you for what a great question. Um, so I hate to tell you, but I don't know the perfect or exact answer to that. Every dog is a unique individual. And if your week-long vacation will include your dog being managed for his absences, we shouldn't see, a whole lot of regression. But some dogs with separation anxiety, change in their universe is a big issue and it throws them off. So if I were in your shoes, Magda, I would say, you know what, I'm just going to expect that when we get back from our week-long vacation, we're going to just take we're going to take a day off when we get back and do not no separation anxiety training. And then after that, a day or two later, we'll start to work on our separation anxiety protocol again, but in really easy wins for the dog, and just have that first handful of days when you return be set up for the most success possible. And from there, you should be able to get right back on track. Obviously, it's again a little different for every dog, but that would be my general thoughts and advice. Sherry, I'm so happy I was able to catch this live. Thank you. That's so nice. The more knowledgeable people we have, the opportunity to listen and learn from helps us. Wow. Thank you for those kind words. Um, Sherry, which company, if you happen to know? And see Sherry's comment up above that might be referring to. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. Kona's touch. Okay, well, we've got just a few more minutes, and I think that one of the things, good, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that, Magda. Just, yeah, and regressions and little blips along the way are so normal for dogs. And so, don't let it make you feel personally frustrated or overwhelmed with your dog. It's just a little speed bump along the way if it takes you a week to get back to where you were before or however long, right? Amanda, do dogs seem to lose their progress if after successful training owners end up being home a lot again? So I think we're going to have a lot better answer to this question in the coming months, right? Um, and I will say, I've got a lot of clients from the past 2 decades that have reached out to me and said, oh, you helped me 5 years ago with my dog Pepe. This dog Pepe just comes to mind because I just started working with them again. And the one of the pet parents had a knee replacement and was off and was home 24/7 for several weeks. And after that experience, the dog did regress some. Um, we don't see those regressions all that often when dogs, get through their separation anxiety protocol successfully. But we want to remind people that any really big change in the dog's routine and or environment could impact the dog and cause some regression. The good news is, though, most of those dogs that have a bit of a regression, which we will potentially see. Um, it's just a matter of using that alone time muscle again and prepping it back up so that they are once again successful with staying home alone. Olga, it's always great to hear you talking about dogs with separation anxiety. Thank you for your kind words. Um, Do you ever find, I think we've got 2 more minutes. So, Susie, this will probably be our last question that we've got today. Find that the separation anxiety is with the owner and not the dog? Yes, the answer to that is yes. Let me finish your comment though. The reason I ask is a client of mine recently went back to work and she was devastated leaving the dog. However, one monitoring of the dog, he was perfectly fine. I've been supporting her as best I can, and she seems to be a little bit less stressed. So I think this is a great question to end on. I do expect more so than ever, some of our dog guardians are going to struggle with having to go back to work or other life activities after having spent so much wonderful quality time with their dog. I mean, so many of these dogs, both ones that we'd already had and the, dogs that were acquired during the pandemic, have been our rock, our sort of lifeline to, some joy, challenging time of COVID the last year. Um, and so it's really, it's the onus is on us to help them and using cameras, but helping them not become addicted to those cameras is one way to help them through this process. Oh, and you're the best, Tim. You're the best. And I think we are right at the hour, so I'm going to read Tim's comment as our closing statement. He says, one comment: this stuff works. I've seen so many dogs learn that being alone is simply no big deal. Now's the time. Yes, 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 while you're working at home to get started on helping your dog. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for so many great questions and comments. This was a lot of fun. And I look forward to hearing great successes with many of your dogs and the clients that you work with. Thank you all. Thank you, Allison, Robin, all of your kind words. You guys are so great. I'm so glad to have been here. All right, let's see if I click this button. I think it's all over. Have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Thanks again, and thanks again to Bye.